The advertisement appeared in my feed at 3:17 a.m., which should have been the first warning. I wasn't sleeping again. Hadn't slept properly in months, not since the accident. And the blue glow of my laptop was the only light in my apartment. Scrolling through rental listings had become a kind of compulsive therapy. Places I could never afford, wouldn't want to live in, or were too far from my teaching job at the community college. But that night, the algorithm served me something different. Historic Victorian available. Halloween month rental. Seekers of atmosphere encouraged to apply. The photo showed a house that seemed to absorb the light around it. 3 stories of weathered clapboard with a turret like a watchtower, a wraparound porch with gingerbread trim, and windows that looked more like eyes than architecture. It stood at the end of a lane canopied by bare-branched oaks, their leaves carpeting the ground in rust and gold. No other houses were visible in the frame, though the description placed it in Hemlock Grove, Michigan, a town I'd never heard of 2 states away. I should have closed the tab, gone to make another cup of tea, counted the cracks in my ceiling again. Instead, I clicked through to the full listing. The details were sparse, almost deliberately cryptic. For bedrooms, 2 baths, original features throughout. The rent was suspiciously low for a property of that size. The available dates were October 15th through November 5th. The contact was a property management company called Thorne & Sons, EST 1890. There was no phone number, only a contact form. What hooked me, what truly sank the barb, was the last line of the description. Ideal for those seeking quiet reflection or artistic pursuit. The house has its own rhythms. Prospective tenants should appreciate history's tangible presence. My cursor hovered over the X in the corner of the browser. I'd been trying to write again. Not the dry academic papers my department expected, but the kind of writing I'd done before life turned to ash: short stories, fragments of novels, anything that wasn't footnoted and peer-reviewed. For a year, every document I opened remained blank except for a blinking cursor that seemed to mock my emptiness. My therapist called it creative blockage mixed with grief. I called it a desert, a house with its own rhythms, a house that encouraged artistic pursuit. It was marketing, of course. Clever phrasing to attract romantic fools who believed a change of scenery could unclog whatever was stuck inside them. I was exactly that kind of fool. I filled out the form. My name, Leo Vance. My occupation, Professor of Comparative Literature, on sabbatical. My reason for interest, seeking quiet surroundings for a writing project. I didn't mention that the project was a ghost, that the quiet I sought was really an escape from the noise in my own head. The constant replay of squealing tires, shattering glass, and the silence that came after. I hit submit at 3:42 a.m. The confirmation page simply read, "Your inquiry has been received. The property is particular. You will be contacted if deemed suitable." I laughed. A dry, hollow sound in my dark apartment. Deemed suitable by a house? I shut the laptop and finally slept, dreamlessly. The response came 2 days later, not to my email, but as a physical letter delivered by courier. Heavy cream paper, black ink in a precise, old-fashioned hand. "Mr. Vance, your application has been reviewed. The house on Sycamore Lane is available for the date specified. The terms are as follows. Rent, $1,500 for the full period, due upon signing. Utilities are included. The house is equipped with all necessities. No parties, no additional overnight guests without prior approval. You are responsible for basic upkeep. The grounds are maintained by a local service. The attic and the root cellar are kept locked and are not part of the leasehold. Asterisk. The house prefers silence after 10 p.m. Asterisk. Asterisk enclosed is a copy of the lease. Sign and return with payment. Keys will be provided upon arrival. The code for the lockbox is 10-31. Asterisk. We trust you will find what you are looking for. Sincerely, Alistair Thorne and Sons." I turned the paper over, half expecting more writing, some explanation for the bizarre final line. The house prefers silence after 10 p.m. It was a typo, surely. They meant the neighborhood or the terms require. but the rest of the letter was so meticulously composed. I checked the enclosed lease, a standard one-page agreement with the unusual clauses inserted verbatim. The address was simply 1 Sycamore Lane, Hemlock Grove, Michigan. My rational mind staged a feeble protest. This was odd, potentially unsafe. Who rents a house via couriered letter in the 21st century? But my rational mind had been losing arguments for over a year. A stronger, more desperate voice countered. What did I have to lose? My apartment was a tomb filled with ghosts of my own making. My sabbatical was a sanctioned retreat from a life I no longer knew how to live. 3 weeks in a strange house in a strange town was exactly the kind of drastic, poetic gesture my former self would have dismissed, and my current self clung to like a lifeline. I wired the money that afternoon. I emailed a scanned copy of the signed lease to the only address I had, a generic info@thornproperties.com that bounced back with an auto-reply. Receipt acknowledged. There was no further communication. Packing was an exercise in minimalism. Clothes, my laptop, a monument to my failure. A box of books I thought might inspire me. Lovecraft, Poe, the Brontes, Shirley Jackson, and my late wife's old leather journal, empty except for her name, Clara, inscribed on the first page in her looping handwriting. I couldn't write in it, but I couldn't leave it behind. I loaded everything into my aging sedan and left the city at dawn on October 15th. The drive was a meditation in gray. Flat highways gave way to rolling hills painted in the fierce, dying colors of autumn. Michigan in October was a flame about to be snuffed out. I crossed into the central time zone and watched the landscape grow denser, the towns farther apart. Hemlock Grove didn't appear on my car's navigation system. I had to use my phone, and the signal grew spotty the deeper I went. I found it just as the sun began to dip below the tree line, casting long, skeletal shadows across the road. The welcome sign was wooden, carved with oak leaves and the town's name. The paint faded. Population, 1,203. Founded 1872. The main street was a postcard of small-town America. A brick-fronted diner, a hardware store with metal buckets of mums on the sidewalk, a library with a steeple, a single traffic light swaying gently in the breeze. It was charming in a way that felt preserved, almost staged. Few people were out. Those I saw moved slowly, deliberately. They didn't stare at my out-of-state plates, but I felt seen, assessed, and filed away. Sycamore Lane was a narrow, unpaved track off the northern end of Main Street. The trees formed a tunnel, their branches weaving together overhead. The light here was murky, greenish, like underwater. My tires crunched on gravel. There were no other driveways, no mailboxes, just this one lane leading to one house. And then there it was. The photograph hadn't done it justice. It hadn't captured the sheer weight of the place. The Victorian rose from the earth like a geological formation, all asymmetrical peaks and shadowed recesses. The clapboard wasn't just weathered. It was silvered with age, like the bark of an ancient tree. The turret was topped with a conical roof shingled in mossy slate. The porch wrapped around two sides, its railings intricate with scrollwork that from a distance looked like thorny vines. Every window was dark. The grounds were wild. Tall grass gave way to a forest of untamed shrubs and towering, black-barked trees. Fallen leaves lay in deep, unraked drifts. There was no lawn, no garden, just nature reclaiming its space right up to the foundation. I parked and stepped out. The air was cold and carried the rich, damp scent of decomposing leaves and distant wood smoke. The silence was profound. No birds, no insects, just the faint whisper of the wind in the high branches. I retrieved the key from the lockbox mounted on a post by the steps. The code, 10 to 31, worked. The keys inside were old and heavy, 2 of them on a simple iron ring. The front door was solid oak, stained dark, with a cast-iron knocker in the shape of a raven. The key turned smoothly with a satisfying thunk. The door swung inward silently, on well-oiled hinges. The smell hit me first. Not the musty decay I'd expected, but a complex bouquet. Beeswax, old books, dried lavender, and beneath it all, the faint, clean scent of cold stone. The entry hall was vast, with a staircase ascending into gloom to my right. The floors were dark, wide plank oak, covered in the center by a faded but still vibrant Persian rug. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, unlit. To the left was a pocket door, partially open, revealing a parlor with heavy velvet drapes and the shapes of furniture under dust sheets. Ahead, a hallway led deeper into the house. "Hello!" My voice was too loud, swallowed quickly by the stillness. No answer. I hadn't truly expected one. I brought my bags in, setting them by the foot of the stairs. The act felt intrusive, like speaking in a library. I explored cautiously. The parlor was frozen in time. A marble fireplace, a grand piano, shelves lined with leather-bound books. The furniture, when I lifted a sheet, was upholstered in deep burgundy damask, worn but not threadbare. There was no dust. The house was clean in a way that felt recent, yet completely untouched by modern life. No television, no stereo, no charging ports. A single old-fashioned rotary phone sat on a side table, its cord coiled neatly. The kitchen was at the back of the house, a large, high-ceilinged room with a massive cast-iron stove, a deep porcelain sink, and an icebox that was literally an icebox, though a modern, silent refrigerator hummed in the pantry. The cabinets were stocked with basic dishes, all plain white china. The pantry held cans of soup, beans, coffee, tea, flour, sugar. As promised, the necessities were provided. A formal dining room held a table that could seat 12. A library made my breath catch. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves packed with volumes, 2 leather armchairs, and a writing desk positioned to look out a bay window onto the tangled back garden. A sunroom, its wicker furniture also sheeted, was a cage of glass and dying light. Upstairs, for bedrooms each held a wrought iron or carved wooden bed, a wardrobe, a washstand. The largest, in the turret, had windows on 3 sides and a view of the lane disappearing into the woods. I claimed this one. The bathroom featured a clawfoot tub with a shower rig attached, and the water, when I turned the tap, ran clear and hot after a minute of groaning pipes. It was all perfectly preserved, impeccably maintained, and utterly devoid of personal effects. No photographs, no letters, no discarded knitting or forgotten toys. It was a stage set waiting for a performance. I unpacked, the simple task taking on a ritualistic quality in the quiet. I placed Clara's journal on the nightstand. I set up my laptop on the writing desk in the turret room, its sleek modernity a blasphemy against the aged wood. I hung my few clothes in the wardrobe, which smelled of cedar. By the time I finished, dusk had settled in earnest. I turned on lamps, they had actual pull chains, and the bulbs were warm, low wattage, doing little to push back the gathering dark. I made a simple dinner of soup and bread at the enormous kitchen table, the scrape of my spoon echoing. The silence was different at night. It wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. The house creaked and settled, but the sounds were sporadic, isolated. A pop from the direction of the stairs, a groan from the ceiling above the library. They didn't feel random. They felt like responses. I tried to read in the library, but my attention wandered. The books were a strange collection, 19th century natural histories, volumes of poetry, Gothic novels, local county records, theological texts. I pulled one out at random, a treatise on the spectral phenomena of the Great Lakes region, 1888. I slid it back onto the shelf. At 9:55 p.m., a new sound began. A low, resonant hum, like a giant tuning fork struck somewhere deep in the earth. It wasn't heard so much as felt in the bones. It vibrated up through the floorboards, into the legs of my chair. It was the house. I was certain of it. And as the grandfather clock in the hall, a clock I hadn't noticed before, began to chime 10 times, the hum intensified for a moment, then faded into a profound, absolute quiet. The house prefers silence after 10 p.m. It wasn't a preference. It was a rule. The air itself seemed to thicken, becoming heavier, more resistant. The normal nocturnal sounds of an old house ceased entirely. No creaks, no settling. Even the wind outside seemed muted. The silence was a presence, a blanket laid over everything. I felt a primitive urge to break it, to shout, to drop a book, to play music from my phone. I did none of those things. Instead, I found myself moving more quietly, setting my book down without a sound, walking on the balls of my feet to the kitchen to rinse my cup. The house was listening. The thought was irrational, but it rooted itself in my mind with the certainty of a fact. I went upstairs to the turret room. The view from the windows was a black void. My own reflection looked back at me. A pale, tired man in a too-big sweater, standing in a pool of lamplight. I turned off the light and got into bed. The sheets were crisp and cold. Lying in the dark, the silence was absolute. My own breathing sounded obscenely loud. My heartbeat was a drum in my ears. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? Quiet. Escape. A blank page. But this wasn't blank. This was a page that had been written on long ago, then carefully erased, leaving only impressions, ghosts of ink. The house was full of stories. I could feel them pressing against the silence, waiting for their turn to be told. As I hovered on the edge of sleep, a memory surfaced, unbidden. Clara, in our first apartment, laughing as she tried to hang a picture. "Every house has a heartbeat, Leo," she'd said, the hammer poised in her hand. "You just have to be still enough to hear it." I was still now, so still I could hear nothing at all. And in that nothing, I thought I could feel it. A slow, deep, patient pulse in the dark. The house's heartbeat. Or perhaps it was just my own, amplified by fear and loneliness and the sheer, overwhelming weight of the past, both mine and this place's. The digital clock on my laptop, the only modern timepiece in the room, glowed 11:59 p.m., then 12 a.m., October 16th, 2 weeks until Halloween. Somewhere below me, in the profound dark of the first floor, a floorboard creaked. A single, deliberate sound in the perfect silence. I held my breath. The silence returned, deeper than before. It was just the house, I told myself. Just an old house settling. But I didn't believe it. And in that moment, I knew my creative block was over. I had something to write about now. I had the house. And the house, it seemed, had me. Morning arrived not with a sunrise, but with a gradual lightening of the gray. A thick fog had rolled in from the woods overnight, swallowing the grounds and reducing the world beyond the windows to vague, shifting shapes. The silence of the night had broken with the first chime of the grandfather clock at 6 a.m., replaced by the ordinary, reassuring sounds of an old house. The groan of pipes as heat clicked on, the distant hum of the refrigerator, the patter of what I hoped was just rain on the turret roof. The floorboard creak from the depths of the night felt like a half-remembered dream. I lay in bed for a long time, listening, testing the atmosphere. The watchful pressure of the darkness had lifted. The house felt dormant, asleep or pretending to be. In the kitchen, I made coffee in a percolator I found in a cupboard. The process was slow, meditative. While it bubbled, I investigated the back door. It led to a stone patio, now slick with moisture, which gave way to the wild garden. Through the fog, I could make out the shapes of overgrown rose bushes, their thorny canes like clutching hands, and the silhouette of a stone bird bath, tipped on its side. At the edge of the visible lawn, the forest began, a wall of pine and oak. On the doorframe, inside at about shoulder height, someone had carved a small symbol into the wood. It was faint, smoothed by years of paint and touch. A circle intersected by a downward-pointing arrow, like a stylized key or a strange tear. I ran my thumb over it. Felt intentional, not the work of a bored child. The coffee was strong and bitter. I took my cup into the library, drawn to the shelves. The organization was not alphabetical but seemed thematic, or perhaps chronological. I found a section on local history. I pulled a heavy, photo-clipped volume titled Hemlock Grove, Annals and Anecdotes, 1872 to 1922. I settled into one of the leather armchairs. The fog pressed against the bay window, a cozy blanket of white noise. The book smelled of acidic paper and glue. The early pages were standard town boosterism. Founding by lumber baron Ezekiel Thorne of the property management Thorns, I presumed, the rise of the sawmill, the building of the railway spur. Photographs showed Main Street bustling with horses and wagons, men in stiff collars, women in long skirts. Then, around the turn of the century, the tone shifted. The prose grew more somber, the anecdotes darker. I read about a sawmill accident that claimed 5 lives, a diphtheria outbreak that emptied a row of houses, a fire that destroyed the original church. Hemlock Grove, it seemed, was adept at tragedy. My interest sharpened when I reached a chapter titled Architectural Sentinels. It featured sketches of the town's notable homes. And there, on page 147, was a detailed drawing of this house. It was labeled Thorn Manor, built 1881. The architect was given as Alastair Thorn, for his bride, Genevieve. The drawing showed the house in its prime, the gardens manicured, the trim crisp. The description was florid. A testament to love and craftsmanship, Thorn Manor stands as a beacon of refinement on Sycamore Lane. Its unique design, featuring a central turret for astronomical observation and a floor plan that follows sacred geometrical principles, was the talk of the county. Mr. Thorn, a student of the metaphysical as well as the material, is said to have incorporated certain features to ensure the happiness and protection of its inhabitants. The paragraph ended there, coy and unsettling. What features? I flipped the page. The next chapter began abruptly with the founding of the library. No more mention of the house or the Thorns. I spent an hour cross-referencing. Other books yielded slivers. Genevieve Thorn, née Duval, was from New Orleans. She was remembered as frail, ethereal, devoted to her garden. She died in 1898. The cause was listed vaguely as a wasting illness. Alastair Thorn survived her by 3 decades, becoming a reclusive figure, known for his extensive library and eccentricities. The house passed out of the family in the 1930s. There was no mention of renters, of Halloween, of strange rules. My stomach growled, pulling me from the past. I needed groceries beyond the canned basics. I also needed to see another human face, to ground myself in the mundane. The fog had thinned to a mist by the time I drove back down Sycamore Lane. Hemlock Grove in daylight was still quiet, but less sinister. The diner, the Grove Spoon, had a neon open sign buzzing in the window. A bell jangled as I entered. The air was warm, smelling of grease, coffee, and fried onions. A handful of locals sat at the counter or in cracked vinyl booths. Conversations paused as I walked in, then resumed at a lower volume. I felt every eye on me, the appraisal quick but thorough. I took a booth by the window. A waitress in her 50s, with a tired smile and a name tag that read Dottie, brought me a menu. Passing through? She asked, her tone neutral. Staying for a few weeks, I said. Rented the place on Sycamore Lane. Her pen, poised over her order pad, hesitated for a fraction of a second. The smile didn't falter, but it tightened at the edges. The Thorn place. Haven't had renters in a while. You with the Historical Society or something? Writing, I said, the lie coming easily. Needed some quiet. Quiet? She repeated, nodding slowly. You'll get that there. She didn't sound envious. What can I get you? I ordered a late breakfast. As she turned to leave, I asked, do you know anything about the history of the house? The Thorn family? She half turned back, her expression carefully blank. Old families have old stories. Most of them aren't worth the telling over eggs. The library might have more. Mabel Gunderson runs it. She's the one for history. Her message was clear. Ask elsewhere. The food was good, solid. As I ate, I listened to the snippets of conversation around me. Talk of the coming frost, a high school football game, a broken tractor. Normal, small-town stuff. Yet my presence was a ripple in their pond. I caught glances, saw heads tilt toward me. I was news. After paying, I walked across the street to the hardware store. I needed a better reading lamp. The store was a cavern of practicality. Aisles packed with tools, seeds, paint, and hardware. An old man with forearms like knotted rope watched me from behind the counter. Help you? I'm looking for a sturdy lamp. For reading, he grunted, coming out from behind the counter. Back here. He led me to an aisle. That one's good. No nonsense. He pointed to a simple brass banker's lamp. Perfect. As he rang it up, I ventured, I'm staying out on Sycamore. I heard. He didn't look up from the register. The house has some interesting carvings. On a door frame, a circle with an arrow down through it.